Hello, my name is Darren McGregor, and as we film this in December 2013, I'm completing my 10th and final year as Principal of Catholic College Bendigo. I'd like to spend the next little while explaining to you some of the symbolism in the Marian Centre that you can see behind us. So let's go back. It's 2005, and in 2005 we began to design and plan for a multi-purpose centre for Catholic College Bendigo. It needed to enable us to gather as one entire college. It needed to provide state-of-the-art sporting facilities, and it needed to provide state-of-the-art music and drama facilities. But added to that, and perhaps enriching that, was a sacred space out the front of the Marian Theatre. And so today I'm going to take you through some of the symbolism that's in that. So 2005, what would be behind me? Commonly known as St Mick's, it contained a couple of netball courts, asphalt area, and really a space which couldn't really be utilised for anything other than netball and social gathering at lunchtime. What was here though, in 2005 of course, was this beautiful lemon-scented gum behind me. The stories of history tell us, it's not written anywhere, but the oral history tells us that this tree was planted in 1942 by a Sister of Mercy who obtained it from the bishop's property out at Genazzano in Kangaroo Flat. This tree has become a significant symbol in our college community, and in 2013 actually adorns the front of our college magazine. So 1942 until now, that lemon-scented gum has grown and become such a beautiful tree that it is today. When we began to design the Marian Centre, one of the non-negotiables, if you like, was that the tree had to stay and it was not to be damaged. In fact, it was actually written into the contracts that there were penalties if there was any damage to the tree. So on to our religious sacred space outside the Marian Centre. You'll notice as we go through, and you might be able to see in the picture at the moment, if you look closely there are a number of pillars curving their way towards the centre. There are actually deliberately 14 of those pillars, one pillar for each station of the cross. And where we stand here in Wright Street, the idea was that as you came up Wright Street, the centre opened up to you. And so the stations of the cross call us to travel into the building. Amidst the artwork, you'll notice that there are words and phrases in various places. However, there is only one place in the artwork where we actually quote scripture, and it's here on this plinth at the top of Wright Street, where it's a quote from Luke which simply says, where Jesus simply says, "Do not be afraid." One interpretation of Jesus mentioning fear and afraid in the scriptures is an indication that those who are experiencing the event at the time aren't fully understanding the faith experience. So often when Jesus says, "Do not be afraid," what he's actually saying to us is, let's explore the faith component of this. Let's look at what this gospel, this reading, this experience means to us in our lives. And so we decided that in drawing people into the space, that we would do just that and invite them, as Jesus says, do not be afraid. It's always interesting when you put so much work into something that people interpret it differently. And a few weeks after the opening, I was talking to one of our Year 10 students down in Wright Street, and he noticed the wording here. And I said, "What do you think?" Now, I wasn't expecting a theological interpretation, but I liked his. He said, "Mr McGregor, it's a theatre, it's for our performers. What a great idea as they walk in to perform. Do not be afraid." I'm happy with that explanation as well. This slate that you'll notice at the bottom of the plinth is from Castlemaine, and we've used local stone to throughout the entire feature. We'll see a couple of places where that Castlemaine stone is, but here at the plinth, if we follow the Castlemaine stone, you'll notice that it takes us back to the Marian statue in the middle of the sacred space. I'm standing here now at the Marian statue, which in many ways is the centrepiece of this sacred space. When we were planning to create this statue of Mary, we were after some significant features. We wanted Mary to be young, because history tells us that when Jesus was born, Mary was probably only 14 or 15 years old. So we wanted Mary to be young. We wanted Mary to be Jewish, to be Hebrew, and we wanted her to be strong, firm and wise. And so we've tried to capture that in her face in this picture. The other elements of this to explain to you, you'll notice here that there's a piece of brass. Now the brass only exists in two places in the entire sacred space, here next to Mary's heart, and as you'll see later, in the crucifix round the corner where Jesus is depicted. The second element are these 5 marks here, which we refer to as the 5 wounds of Christ, which he received while he was on the cross. On the back, as we'll have a look at in a moment, on the back of this beautiful statue is another piece of writing, not a scripture piece, but another piece of writing. And we'll look at that in a moment. But before we do, if you could be standing where I am, and perhaps later we'll show you this shot, as I look here, I can see the other significant words which have been placed here. Again, these aren't quotes from scripture, but they are quotes to draw us into what it means to belong to a Marian church. And so, in the rustic iron across the top, it says she, of course referring to Mary, she ponders with us, she weeps with us, she rejoices with us, she leads us to Jesus. They're all important elements of making sure that we know Mary was very much a human being. Mary was a mother. But her most important role in life, while she rejoiced with us, wept with us, the most important thing she did was lead us to Jesus. And where I stand, as I read she leads to Jesus, the rustic artwork then takes us to the cathedral, which of course in Bendigo is where we acknowledge our centrepiece of our faith and the greater presence of Jesus. Remember, this is the Marian Centre, named after Mary, and calling us to live a Marian spirituality. You'll notice here that hopefully you will notice, that we were trying to capture some significant elements of Mary. We wanted Mary, first of all, to be young. We wanted her to be Hebrew, a Jewish girl. And we wanted her to be able to depict that she was wise and firm but fair. And so, you'll see in the face, I think we've depicted quite well, a calm, peaceful, firm, but very much young Hebrew woman who was the mother of Jesus. In the design elements, you'll notice also that there's a piece of brass here. This brass is only used twice in the entire sacred space. Once here, next to the heart of Mary. And the second time, as you will see later, is at the crucifix around the corner depicting Jesus. The second element are these 5 marks here, which represent the 5 wounds of Jesus which he received while he was on the cross. As I stand here, and you'll see pictures of it later, but I can also see some other words which we've put across the top of the rustic iron along the stations of the cross. And it says, she, now when we say she, obviously we're talking about Mary. She ponders with us, she weeps with us, she rejoices with us, she leads us to Jesus. And whilst it's important that we remember that she pondered with us, wept with us, and rejoices with us, her most important role was to lead us to Jesus. And it's interesting that as we follow the rustic iron, and it says she leads us to Jesus, it points down to our cathedral, the place in our town where we acknowledge is the centre of the celebration of our faith, the celebration of Jesus. On the back of this beautiful statue are some more words. Let's go around now and have a look at those words. One of the things we wanted to emphasise when we created the sacred space is that this is a time when God is with us. If we sit here on our own or in a group, we wanted to clearly say, yes, we belong to a Marian church. Yes, Jesus is part of our lives. But we wanted to really emphasise that God is with us here, now, in this space. And so we spent quite a lot of time wondering how to depict that, what words would say that. The final piece behind me emphasises not just that Jesus is with us, but also, as you can see in the wording, on this land, with this people, at this time. Significantly trying to get across to people that as you sit in this sacred space, God is with you, in this place, with this people, at this time. We're now standing in the foyer of the Marian Centre, and you'll see behind me, almost in the middle of the floor, you'll see the 14th station of the cross. Not an architectural mistake. No, we didn't get the measurements wrong. We've deliberately brought this pillar into the foyer to finish the journey, to draw us into the celebration of students' gifts here in the foyer and in the theatre, and indeed in the sports centre behind us. Another element I'd like to point out, which might seem minor, but it certainly adds to the overall experience. If you look at the rustic iron here, you'll notice what look like small curves. They're actually gum leaves. And when you visit the Marian Centre and walk around on a hot summer's day like today, you'll actually see very similar gum leaves lying scattered around the concrete. So the artist has tried to bring in that element of the gum tree that we met earlier. There's another element of the Marian Centre and this sacred space that I haven't even mentioned to you, and that's the paschal fish, the ichthys, and you might have seen that paschal shape. In the building, that's actually been designed to be included. If we were in a helicopter now, up above the Marian Centre, we could actually see that with the curve of the Stations of the Cross, a difference in the colour bond in the roof, and then the second curve are the seats that go around the other side of the Marian statue. When you walk into this area, you will actually notice the carpet has the curve in the carpet. Just another reminder that the ichthys, the paschal fish, the symbol of Jesus, that Jesus is with us in this space. When we were designing this sacred space, Bishop Joseph Grech was the Bishop of Sandhurst. Those of you who don't know Bishop Joe, he was a very enigmatic, very charismatic person, and his big message to our young people was that Jesus wants to be part of their lives. When we were designing the centre, Bishop Joe would say to me, make sure there's a crucifix, make sure there's a Jesus. And you can see, as we stand at the top of Wright Street, you can see the crucifix. Notice the connection, two connections. One, hopefully you've noticed, another you may not. The first is the same material has been used in the crucifix as sits above Mary's heart. The second thing, which is perhaps a bit more obscure, is if you were to follow the curve of the Stations of the Cross, and remember that forms the ichthys, the paschal fish, if you followed that and walked through the building and followed that curve, you would actually come to this crucifix here at the top of the Marian Centre.